Hello, my name is Vidyart Kisoon and I live and work in Guyana. This presentation about the opposition to LGBTQ rights in Guyana was done as part of a webinar concerned with the issues of the rights of gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender and queer persons in the Caribbean. I volunteer as a coordinator of the Caribbean International Resources Network. I have been involved in the work for LGBTQ equality in Guyana since 2001. In this presentation, I would like to first look at the history of LGBTIQ life and then look at the nature of the opposition. I include I intersex because that documentation has also happens in the way we deal with non-normative, binary, gender and sexual orientation. Now, in 1898, we have a record of the punishment for sodomy using the current sodomy laws to Nabibak and Mohangu, who were coming as Indian indentured laborers on the ship the Mersey. In 1903, there is record of Rukmini as a hermaphrodite on the ship coming from India called the Clyde. In 1959, there's a record of an all-male wedding of the year in Georgetown with reference to a previous very public celebration. In 1966, there's a record of a post-mortem done of Carolyn Vaughan, who's part man, part woman. In 1978, there's a record of two sex change operations done through the public health system, and one of the persons still lives in Guyana. In 1979, the lawyer Stanley Moore says it's time to decriminalize sodomy in his defense of a client who was charged under those laws. We come forward now to 2001 when the issue reaches the Parliament through the constitutional reform process. First, there was a constitutional amendment to add sexual orientation to the grounds of discrimination. The Parliament agreed, but it was thrown out by President Jagdeo after prayers for him to do so. Then in 2003, there was a constitutional amendment discussed in Parliament. In 2010, there was a constitutional challenge to the cross-dressing laws. In 2010, there was also the UPR recommendation to Guyana for equality for LGBTQ. In 2012, the Parliamentary Select Committee was formed to deal with all the UPR issues. The decriminalization of consensual adult same-sex relations and discrimination against LGBT, and also things like beating children and the death penalty. In 2013, the decision was handed down in a cross-dressing case in which it said that it was okay for persons to cross-dress as long as it was not for an improper purpose, but that purpose had to be defined by police. In 2014, protests against violence against LGBT persons and the lack of justice for victims of violence. And these protests have been happening sort of since 2011, 2012, 2013. And also in 2014, protests against homophobic comments by religious leaders. So what is the history of the opposition to LGBTQ rights? I would like to say that that opposition tended to rise and appear more organized during the time in 2001, 2003, and 2012 when we were discussing the issues around legal decriminalization and a legalization of non-discrimination against LGBT persons. This is a part of an advertisement that was published in 2001. The leaders of the Christian community called the nation of Guyana to repent, fast, and pray for God's intervention to stop the legalization of homosexuality and all other forms of sexual immorality, which would contribute to the destruction of our society and invite God's judgment on Guyana. And the duration of this fast was for these days in 2001. The advertisement was a full-page advertisement in the Sunday newspapers, and the President Jagdeo and President Janet Jagan both participated in this fast. So we had this organizing around this constitutional amendment, the merging of the fellowship, but with the ideological influences from the United States, from the churches in the United States, where you found a lot of the language around bestiality and child abuse and marriage and families breaking down and so on, coming from these places. So Guyana's future was going to be this horrible thing which the United States was supposed to be, because gay and lesbian people had rights. In 2003, there was a public lobbying by some Christian and Muslim groups. Then the Exodus Global Alliance member in Guyana evolved, called Operation Restoration, whose mission was to convert LGBT persons and to make them straight. And then also we had His Way Out Ministries, and there's a link to the article where this came from, that the Caribbean is ripe for ex-gay ministry planting and development. Ultimately, His Way Out Ministries believes wholeheartedly we're called to this part of God's creation. And they're from Jamaica, Guyana, Trinidad, and Tobago. In 2012, there was another rally and series of events which came around the same time that the UPR, the Parliamentary Select Committee, was formed. And the Christian community issued the two statement about the proposed decriminalization of homosexuality, and also teaching and preaching notes for pastors and Christian leaders. We love homosexuals, you cannot shun them. These were the kinds of things which were said. We cannot shun them if we want to change them. We have to resist imperialism, which wants to challenge our sovereignty. We have no discrimination, but no violence against homosexuals, and there were no calls for that. It is possible for persons to change their sexual orientation, and that we need to preserve families. In 2014, the Junior Minister of Finance, Mr. Juan Edgel, who is also a bishop, said homosexuality is destructive and should not be tolerated. He still remains the Junior Minister of Finance. So in summary, what I'm trying to say is that the opposition is, as we said, more visible and organized when there's likely to be legal changes in Parliament. During the constitutional challenge to the cross-dressing laws, there wasn't any sort of visible opposition, unlike, say, in Belize and Jamaica, though it was reported, that some of the the members of the Christian fraternity did attend court for the hearings. And it's important to know that there are some religious leaders who support LGBTQ equality. For example, Bishop Allen of the Roman Catholic Church and Swami Aksharananda. This is a list of some of the organizations in Guyana who deal with LGBTIQ rights. There's the Guyana Rainbow Coalition, the Guyana Trans United, and the Society Against Sexual Orientation Discrimination. Thank you for listening.